All right, everyone, Emily Rhodes, AICP.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here today, and for Molly for organizing this great event. It was great to hear about all the exciting things that you all are working on this morning. So today I'm going to talk about economic development in U.S. coal communities. And just to set the stage, which communities, what are we talking about when we talk about coal communities and the changing coal economy? And I'm not going to dwell on this too long because, as you can see on the slide, Indiana County is highlighted here as one of many Appalachian communities that has experienced some significant losses and reduction in the mining industry. And so, we know that coal communities hold this dual reality of, dependence on the coal industry. Maybe it was linked to the identity. At the same time, this reality that as our energy sector is shifting, experiencing that economic and job loss associated with the transitioning economy. And it's not just coal mine communities, but coal plant communities as well. This is a chart from a report that the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, IEFA, puts out every year, kind of this outlook for coal. And when the founders of the Just Transition Fund, the initiative I'm here representing today, when they were looking at creating the initiative back in about 2013, 2014, they saw these announced closures coming up, these years like 2015 and 2018, where we saw a large retirement in coal capacity, and knew that this was going to be something that communities were going to have to grapple with into the future. And we can see that it's projected to continue throughout the next decade. But the challenge that we're really talking about today is this issue of economic distress that is in coal plant and coal mine communities, and really the ripple effect that can have throughout a community. So we're talking both about the direct job loss that might be experienced when a coal mine or a coal plant closes, but also how that ripples throughout the communities and the regions. The income that's no longer being spent at the various service throughout the communities, the impact on the municipal or the service providers, even down to thinking about donations or volunteerism. It's having a significant impact beyond just the coal plant or that coal mine. And then the layers of economic distress. So, in coal mining communities, we see the reduction of severance tax, or the tax that companies would have to pay to remove the coal from the ground. When a coal plant closes, it can have a significant impact on the property tax. And we've worked in communities where that coal plant may be providing 50, 60, 70% of the municipal budget. And so when that closes, the municipality is left, with that hole, and thinking about how to replace that source. Also think about the impact to special taxing districts. Think about school districts. So it's also this layered effect of financial distress. And so the Just Transition Fund was created to support those most vulnerable communities. And we work on the ground in collaboration with different organizations to advance solutions that are inclusive, equitable, and low carbon. And by equitable, we mean that they are targeting the most vulnerable populations, or the populations that may have been marginalized in the previous economy. By inclusive, we're talking about engaging a diverse and broad level of stakeholders. As we know, and as we've seen throughout your task force work, it takes a wide variety of interest and expertise and skill sets to think about what can be done to create economic development in the future in these communities. And low carbon, because we recognize that dual relationship with climate change, and we cannot invest in high carbon solutions to move forward. So the Just Transitions approach is a hybrid model. We are part funder, grant maker. So since our inception, we've granted over $3 million to community organizations who are addressing these issues. And then we also have we are a technical assistance provider. So working, collaborating with community organizations and municipalities on the ground to apply this Just Transition framework. And recognizing that partial solutions don't work. Can't remember who was talking about it this morning, but we know that these issues are complex, and so it requires thinking about economic development and workforce development and the policy piece to move comprehensive solutions forward. Quick note about where we work. We currently have 10 priority states, but we go where we're invited and where there is a need. So the communities that we work with, they tend to be rural and experience issues of generational poverty and social issues around health and low educational levels. So when we talk about a just transition, what do we mean? We're talking about, these are kind of the 4 pillars that we think about for advancing a just transition. Strengthen and diversify local economies, promote inclusive and equitable growth, build resilience of low-income workers, and accelerating the development of low-carbon solutions. And context matters for these. So when we look at the low-carbon solutions that might work in West Virginia versus Wyoming, we might be looking at advancing solar as a renewable energy source in West Virginia, where Wyoming, the focus might be on wind. Context matters in the impact that a closure will have. I was mentioning the severance tax. That is a big deal in West Virginia. Maybe not so much in Kentucky. There's other factors. There's other issues at play that we need to think about and plan for. And so, and again, to go to the complexity and thinking holistically, I love this quote from one of our grantees. There may not be a silver bullet, but there could be 1,000 silver BBs. And so, really thinking about all the different angles and aspects and the complexity of the things that our communities are facing right now. And so we partner with on-the-ground communities that are intimately knowledgeable of, what needs to be done. I think almost more importantly, who needs to be at the table and who needs to be included to think about and advance economic development. And so I'm just going to do a quick 3 case studies of some of our grantees and the work that they're doing on the ground. So first, Appalachian Sustainable Development. They are a nonprofit located in Virginia, and they focus on sustainable agriculture and developing models and systems that grow the economies in their communities. So like the Sustainable Indiana County that you were, the Sustainable Agriculture group was mentioning this morning, they're asking that question of how can we bring good paying jobs to sustainable agriculture in our communities, and how can we develop these models and structures to build up the economies and keep that local wealth within their communities. So their approach to this was to connect individual communities to a broader regional strategy. And they applied for and received a POWER grant, a partnership for opportunity, workforce and economic revitalization, which is a grant through ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission. And they created the Food Enterprise Corridor. And the Food Enterprise Corridor connects local farmers and nonprofits to broader markets, to urban markets and to wholesalers. And so they did this corridor through 90 counties in West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. And through their work, they were able to create nearly 80 jobs. They're able to retain 700 jobs and help nearly 500 producers improve their businesses. So they were really looking at how to, I think Commissioner Hess was talking about this earlier, connecting those urban and rural markets to ensure that there's that investment back into their communities. In Ohio, the organization Rural Action, they're a community development organization that works in about 32 county membership base. And their approach is a asset-based development approach. So looking at what assets do they currently have that can be leveraged to advance their solutions. And so they're a great organization. They have a series of different initiatives that they work on. But the one that I wanted to lift up today is that they have been looking at how to expand their capacity in renewable energy. And so they have a solar electrification certification program that does job and skill training so that their residents and their membership can be trained on solar installations. And part of this was also they knew that their utility was looking to build a solar manufacturing plant in one of their counties. And so thinking about, again, what is the broader context, what is happening in their region that they can then tap into to ensure that their residents have the skill set and the job training for these future jobs in solar manufacturing. I was excited to hear that pursuing the SolSmart designation here as well. Was another approach and strategy of Rural Action that they were supporting a number of counties throughout their membership base in receiving that SolSmart designation because that's free technical assistance through the U.S. Department of Energy. And that's, again, a way to tell companies and solar businesses, hey, we're open for business. We have the right zoning and regulations and permitting, and then pair that with their job training, the right skill sets for you to come into our community. And then moving a little bit further west in Colstrip, Montana, working with an organization called Northern Plains Resource Council. And they're a conservation organization that is deeply focused on the remediation of coal ash ponds. And the remediation both for the environmental benefits and to ensure that their community doesn't have this lasting legacy of environmental contamination if the ponds, were to be, capped and abandoned, but rather how can they clean them to ensure the health of their environment into the future, but also as a workforce development aspect. So they've done, they have 2 studies now, I believe, that they've now published that looks at what the job creation potential is for transferring or for skill transfer for former coal plant and coal mine employees to engage in these remediation efforts. In Colstrip, Montana, they have a coal plant and a coal mine, and their coal plant is retiring 2 of their units, I believe, by the end of this year, and looking for a full retirement by 2023. And this could mean a loss of 300 jobs. And this is a company town. It was built up around the plant and the mine. So that will have significant impact on, again, the community as a whole, not just those 300 the families that will be no longer employed at the plant. So are there opportunities to move them from that, the coal industry into remediation? They're also looking at how they can partner with their state Department of Environmental Quality, with the utility, in order to move that remediation forward. So we have the 3 case studies, but what, when we start working with a community, thinking about what is the process that is required to move some of those projects into reality. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot is early planning. And, this can be, creating the plan, thinking about what the impact of an industry transition will be to your community. I love Commissioner Rhodes said this morning that, part of the reason that Indiana County is able to overcome obstacles is because of the visionary plan that you have. I think that really speaks to the importance of early planning. And it's also, we see the importance of having a leader or some leadership to move the process forward, to think about how do we bring people together and engage people and find funding and keep the process moving forward. And so also great to hear, that Molly is here in the position to really, continue to keep that momentum going. The other thing I'll say about early planning is, the importance of building partnerships maybe before crisis strikes. Sometimes we work in places where, they might hear the plant is closing or there is another economic transition. And, when people are kind of in that crisis mode, it might be harder to build those partnerships and those relationships. If it's happening prior to that you have that rapport, that you, have someone that you can call to talk about what the impact might be or what potential strategies are for moving forward, this can be a real benefit for early planning. We've talked a bit about engaging diverse stakeholders, but really asking these questions of who is impacted by an economic transition and who will benefit from the solutions and the programs that are going forward. Who's not at the table that needs to be here? You have a great room of folks here, but are there voices that aren't being lifted up? Are there others who need to be included in the conversation? Identifying funding, I think I've heard that for each of the task force groups this morning. One of their goals is identifying funding. So it's always going to be an issue. So thinking about the funding sources that align with your mission and vision, thinking beyond maybe the usual suspects. What is creative or unique about the project or program that you're looking to pursue, and then really thinking about how does that align with grants or foundations goals as well. And then what assets can you leverage? And, I was looking on the Indiana County Sustainability website, which again is a great resource and a great tool to have. And so, that in your meetings, I think meetings 1 or 2, you were looking at what those assets were that you had in your community already that could be leveraged. And, that's a key part in thinking about identifying that funding and resources. And then finally, planning for the long term, and kind of breaking that down into fiscal, monetary, to social, and then the physical site. So there's going to be both immediate and long-term impacts with any economic transition, and so how can you kind of keep that longer horizon in mind while still moving forward, on small goals? And again, I just want to say how excited I was to hear, these are things that a lot of the groups are already thinking about. I heard that in this morning's report outs, thinking about, yes, still keeping those long-term goals on the mind, but what are the steps that we can take to get there? And so lastly, I just want to drill down a bit into funding resources. It sounds like there's some good partnerships that are being made. I heard that you received the local food, local places grant through EPA, but these are some of the federal funding resources that we talk to or see a lot in the communities that we work with. I'll also say, grants.gov is a great repository of all of these. Thinking about your state and state workforce development or economic development or state departments of environmental quality, where are there partnerships that can be made? And maybe it's a bit outside of funding resources, but we've seen some really great and innovative partnerships for moving programs forward with, state departments of state departments of workforce or departments of labor. So, thinking about what maybe other resources that they can bring. I heard someone mention, so thinking about research or studies. We've worked with state departments who have seen that state departments have, might put out a report on, that's quantifying different aspects or providing data or metrics that local communities can use. And then finally, thinking about the private, nonprofit, and philanthropic sectors. So I have to give a plug to the Just Transition Fund. Like I mentioned, we are a funder, and I think philanthropy plays an important role in this work that we're doing. Oftentimes, we'll look to fund, nascent planning efforts, things that maybe are not fully formed or are just getting off the ground. And so the pillars of the Just Transition that I had on the slide earlier, those are also, things that we look for in projects that we work with. I'll say we also have in the past put up provided matching funding for broader, or if you're looking at federal grants or other grants that require a matching fund. And so there's a form on our website too that you can go if you're interested. It's an invitation granting process. So, if you're interested, please talk to me today. I'll be here for most of the day, or fill out the form. And then also looking at community development financial institutions, CDFIs. They often will provide loans for, entrepreneurs to get started, all the way up to things like affordable housing. And then the last one I have on there is your utility. And I guess, thinking even more broadly about that, is there a utility that's willing to engage or support the efforts, and what other private partners can you have? The private sector has an important role to play in this as well when we think about scaling a lot of the programs or projects that we're looking at. The last thing I'll mention that I didn't put up here, but if you're not receiving the National Association of Development Organizations, NADO, N-A-D-O, they have a bi-weekly newsletter called Diversifying Coal Economies, and it is packed with a ton of great resources, and they typically have a section on the funding that's currently available that organizations can apply for. So again, that's NADO, the National Association of Development Organizations. It's a resource I would definitely recommend looking into. So thank you for your time. I think I left a few minutes for questions if we have some. And we have some. Yes, sir.
I have two questions.
Yes.
One is a process question.
Yes.
Will your slide deck be available to this group at some point?
Yes. Yeah, I'll work with Molly to make sure that
They'll
that's.
be up on the website.
Second, who is actually the Just Transition Fund? Who is in behind it? Who is funding it, et cetera?
Yeah, so we are an initiative of the Rockefeller Family Foundation, but we do have a series of funders who support us from the MacArthur Foundation. Bloomberg Philanthropies has supported us. On our website, we have a list of the folks who fund the Just Transition Fund to do our work.
That's the new generation of Rockefellers.
I think I saw another question back here.
Hi, Emily. My name is Byron Stauffer. I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana County Office of Planning and Development. So I just wanted to thank you for your remarks and your presentation today. Kind of following up on Bill's question, just curious, the governor has put forth, Pennsylvania governor has put forth the proposal on the regional greenhouse gas initiative, and given the your organization's multi-state approach, I was wondering if you could speak to some of the impacts that Reggie has had on maybe other states and communities that have implemented the cap and trade program.
Yeah, I would love to follow up with you after that. I can't speak directly to that right now, but I'll come speak to you afterwards and give you my card and make sure that there's additional information on that. Thank you. And I see another one over here. Yeah.
My name is Tony Palamone. I run the Small Business Development Center here in the county over at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And I have a question regarding your first case study.
Yes.
The question is going to be, what really makes that work? What's the secret sauce? Because that's kind of a market initiative. Many years ago, we worked with an organization called the Penn's Corner Farm Alliance. In Indiana County, we have a lot of small farms. And it's kind of a regional effort, and they banded together to work with restaurateurs. So they brought values to both sides of the equation. The restaurateurs wanted the fresh food. The farmers got higher price for their stuff, and they set up an organization to deliver to the city. I'm not sure where that stands right now, but it's mostly membership, so it's limited to like 30 farms or something like that. It looks like that's a broad initiative, and the distribution networks are set up. I mean, these grocery stores and stuff, they get their stuff from California or wherever. This is a cool initiative, but I'm wondering what really makes that work? I mean, what's the secret there? Like, they're going across a lot of states and 300 members?
Yeah, so, I think a lot of it has to do with the partnerships that they've set up. So Appalachian Sustainable Development is the lead organization, but, they've partnered with organizations and municipalities throughout that corridor. I also think it's, that connection to the private sector, to the wholesale markets, that they are able to, bring that, the wealth from those local markets back into the community. And then also Appalachian Sustainable Development, they are on the ground with the farmers. So again, when we talk about working with organizations that are intimately knowledgeable of the context of their constituents, of the folks on the ground, this organization knows that. And so I think it's that they are intimately knowledgeable of that ecosystem, that they're able to make those connections, have that educational component, and again, make that corridor work.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Yeah.
Everyone, a round of applause for Emily Rhodes.